a lawmaker yesterday who's from one of the communities on the border with Benin, and he was saying that he's about to start taking French lessons. And I was like, we're so unserious in Nigeria. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Bad Natives podcast. I'm Adeswagi Wasage out of Abuja.
I am Charles Onyango Obo in Nairobi.
And this is Robert Kavshenga, the bad native in Kampala. And shouts out to Timothy Muheire from Uganda, who is an avid fan of the bad natives and is always dropping comments for us, telling us his views and what he'd like us to improve. So while we have you here, drop us some comments, let us know what you think. And then while you're doing that, up there is a small bell, subscribe, and then you can also follow us on X and your other places where you find your podcasts. That's the Bad Natives podcast. Right.
Yes, welcome everyone to this week's episode. I think I'm leading this conversation, and we're going to start with. Do you guys know this song? I feel like you have to know this song. Um, "Water No Get Enemy" by Fela.
Ah, yes.
Water.
So
No
what
be.
has happened?
I remember that. Not be your enemy or something like that.
Yeah,
No Get Enemy.
And not get enemy.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what we've been talking about how resources have led to conflict across Africa,
Mhm.
or scarcity of resources, whether it's land with the farmer herder clashes or banditry, whether it's the Sahel expanding, but also it's water. We have a water crisis. There's so many ways that global warming is going to affect us now and in the future. And one of those ways is terrorism, and it's wars over water. Hydro-terrorism, as someone called it. And I wanted you to start with the conversation, Charles, particularly when we have our Al Qaeda funded terrorist groups and ISIS or Islamic State funded terrorist groups operating, across Africa and fighting over water.
yeah. In fact, the context you mentioned, I think it was foreign policy who say the hydro-terrorism has increased by 50%. What I mean, that's water-related, violence, and basically what we are seeing now is in the Sahel. These extremist groups are using water it is the ultimate weapon for them because they can poison it, they destroy water sources, and one, they get people to leave, and then two, they get control and of these water sources, and they get political control because now to get water you have to pay them, you have to pledge allegiance to them, and but I think even bigger at the state level, literally every conflict, maybe apart from Russia, Ukraine, it's about water. The Horn of Africa, it is water. The moves by Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar, particularly in Africa, it all at the end of the day is about the control of water because um, you know the question of agriculture is ultimately a question of the control of water. So if you think of it, um, it is, and if you add the climate change factor, this is going to be the existential issue for Africa and indeed the rest of the world for the foreseeable future.
Adesua, do you know how and why, or maybe I think the question is why Uganda, the modern day Ugandan state came into existence?
No.
It is because of water. That's how the Ugandan state came into existence. Because in order to control the the politics of what I would call the broader Middle East, or so Egypt, uh, the Middle East, you had to control the Nile. And so the British needed to find the source of the Nile in order to control or have some kind of say over the Ottoman Empire. And that's how Uganda gets into or comes under control of British influence. The whole Royal Geographical Society and all those guys come down to figure out where the source of the Nile is and so on. So, to Charles's point, water is a strategic resource. Unfortunately, it is one that Africans don't pay a lot of attention to. We pay attention to minerals, we pay attention to crops, coffee, and we are having these huge debates about how we have resources. Nobody has debated water. And yet it was predicted, I think just as about like maybe 10 years ago, that the next major conflict is going to erupt over the control of water. And in particular, the biggest risk area was, I think, identified. I think Charles Kilano did this presentation at Makerere, and you showed that one of the biggest quarrels is going to be over the control of Lake Victoria, which is the largest single water body on the continent. Now, in a context where Lake Chad has pretty much dried into a swamp, in a context where the desert in the Sahel is coming southwards, the question of the livelihood of those people. So, first of all, just existence and survival. Every living thing biologically need 72%. And so 72% of our existence, whether it is as animals or as plants, is water. We're water based. If you look at plants, I mean, I'm a farmer, so I know this. Without water, you cannot have the benefits of photosynthesis. And so a plant, 75% of farming is about water. If it is animals, there is no way you're going to keep livestock without water. So the question is, how does, and then, I'll expand it a little later on. Even industrialization requires significant amounts of water. And Charles was speaking earlier on about the energy needs which are being driven by investments in new technology. Will all need water. And yet we don't seem to have a thought process around how to strategically manage these resources. I mean, one of the biggest, I think it's the longest, no, it's the largest river in Africa, Congo. So there's Nile is the longest, Congo, I think, is the largest. Already the conflict there and the things that we could have done with that river, nobody's discussing it. So it is going to be a major driver of geopolitics, of relationships, of economic viability of certain states. Certain states just will not be viable, or certain countries will not be viable if they have no water. People will just leave. So that's what I would say at this point.
I want to take another angle to this, because you've said that water can be a source of conflict, but water can also force you to work together, right? And this is a conversation that was had here in West Africa because of the River Niger. And Nigeria and Niger said, well, no matter what's gonna happen here, we're gonna have to talk to each other because of this river,
Mhm,
because of this source of water,
mhm,
because we also use it as a source of hydropower and then give that power back to Niger.
mhm,
But it's also a source of contention in Nigeria, whether it's flooding, or it's, they say, okay, Nigerians did not open the dams. Sorry, this is actually River Benue and Cameroon. If we're opening the dams at the right time, and who gets flooded downriver, and all of those things. But with the River Niger, it was a source of, like, well, no matter what happens, Nigeria and Niger are gonna have to work together because of this source of water. So I want to ask Charles, do you see water also just forcing cooperation, not just causing distance?
Oh yes, absolutely. In East Africa, we already have the Nile water. They call it the Nile Water Basin Commission. Is it something like that? That brings a lot of these countries together. And, it is the most consistent and probably longest diplomatic presence in Africa is of Egypt in Uganda.
Mm.
And not even in Kampala, but at the source of the Nile, because the Egyptians keep a very, very close eye, on that. And even amongst countries. So, for example, um, what there is something many people haven't heard of. It is called the Kenya Ethiopian War of the Well. Now,
Mm.
this at the Kenya Ethiopia border, the Gabra of Ethiopia and the Boran of Kenya have had a conflict, and it was at its height between 2004 and 2006, over which 250 people were killed. So, in terms of the security architecture between Kenya and Ethiopia, um, a very important part of it has to do with water. So those countries have to learn, to cooperate and do deals. And I think we are going to see the kind of understanding we have in East Africa over the Nile. Eventually, Sudan and Ethiopia will have to come in. Sudan and Egypt, because Egypt focuses so much on what Ethiopia has done with the dam. But actually, that is the least of their problems. The bigger problem is that the population of East Africa is going to grow so big. Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. The only way those countries survive is going to be through the exploitation of both River Nile and Lake Victoria for irrigation. And that, more than the Gat Dam in Ethiopia, is what is likely to take more water away from Egypt. So I see a future where that we have a new political and diplomatic compact around the Nile and ultimately, the Lake Victoria.
The other, Adesua, the other challenge that we need to, that should focus us as a continent to start working together is the challenge of climate change. And here is why. The You see, Uganda has two major water tanks. So even the River Nile, because Charles has gone back to, if we choose to use Lake Victoria, I mean, I haven't even gone into the damage we're doing to it already in terms of pollution and mining of sand, and that lake could collapse. I'm not going there yet. But Uganda's water, well, I think it's called, Charles, what there was something called the riparian something. It was a new word that came into
Y- Yeah, the
the
riparian, yes.
riparian. So the Ugandan water system is fed by the Rwenzori Mountains in the west and Mount Elgon in the east. Now, a similar problem will be experienced in South Africa. Most of South Africa's water is drawn from Lesotho, and then it feeds the rivers that go into South Africa and even some of the underground streams because they come from the snow that is up in those mountains. I suspect the same thing is in Morocco and places where. Now, with climate change, the glaciers on Rwenzori are drying up. So they are melting, rather, not drying up, they are melting. That means that the catchment area from which water can be sourced is going down. Secondly, the two mountains are responsible for our rain patterns. That's why we have a dual rain system. It's a whole complex thing. But as climate changes, it means that it will likely affect the volumes of water available in this region and feeding these lakes. Now, you couple that with the population pressure. The East African region at the SOA today has the fastest population growth on the African continent. Charles, am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right.
So all those people are going to put pressure on the limited or increasingly limited water resources that we have for whatever needs they may have, whether it's for human consumption, agriculture, or industrialization. All that is not being factored in any of the conversations. What we're having is like technical conversations about what should be in the agreement. And it is funny, it is really odd that we are outsourcing these discussions to the Americans because Trump then announced that he's going to cause an agreement between Ethiopia and Egypt about the Nile and so on. Now, why is it Trump that is managing our water resources and discussions around our water? He has his own issues, of course.
Trump he just wants his Nobel Peace Prize. He's I'm sure every day he asks for a new conflict for them to
No,
bring a
yeah,
conflict to his desk
he,
so he can claim that he solved it. He
well,
just wants that Nobel Peace Prize.
he has a different problem now. He now needs to survive. He has a different conflict on his deck. No, but so my point is that even as we, the three of us here, are discussing this issue, you can see that there are multiple facets. One, do we have an assessment on the African continent about the needs, the water needs for production? For instance, we know how much we need in terms of energy, power, for us to cause development. But do we actually know how much water we need? Do we know how much water we have in our different systems? I mean, if we have we talked to engineers, can we plan for it in terms of its usage? And also know that yes, the guys in the Sudan need this water for irrigation. Us guys need it maybe for fish farming. The Ethiopians need it for power. The Egyptians need it, and then sit round because the biggest problem is that everybody is just trying to impose their will as if it is their need. And we don't have a specific diplomatic initiative around the whole water thing. Now, I don't know, and that's what you'd tell us how, first of all, I am not very familiar and I'd like to hear from you if you know. What are the water resource situations like in the western part and the Sahel region? And when it comes to management, then the other question is, are there initiatives like in Southern Africa where they have put technologies to try and clean up the ocean water and make it humanly usable? I don't know if that, like desalination plants by countries that are along the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, it's sometimes it's very difficult to say because there are definitely things that exist in theory. I don't know how much they exist in practice. So the River Niger, I believe, is the longest river. It goes all the way from Nigeria to Sierra Leone, goes through Niger, goes through Mali, goes through Guinea, and then ends up in Sierra Leone. So it goes all the way through Western Africa. There is a lot of cooperation, as I said, along that line. At least I know with with Niger and Nigeria, with the River Benue, we have cooperation with Cameroon, but River Niger is the more significant water resource in the West.
Mhm.
And you know, I was
How
having
many
the
countries?
conversation
How many countries does it run through?
um maybe five is Niger, Nigeria, Mali, Guinea, Sierra Leone. I think five or six. I might have missed a small country. Maybe it slips through somewhere else, but I think five countries.
Yeah. So where does it
So
originate?
from
And are there
Onitsha to
any?
Lokoja to
Speed?
Timbuktu.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. But I think honestly, we're talking about water resources, we're talking about connectivity. And I in West Africa, I was talking to a lawmaker yesterday who's from one of the communities on the border with Benin, and he was saying that he's about to start taking French lessons. And I was like, we're so unserious in Nigeria because everyone. No, I think it's ridiculous the fact that we don't have proper language development in our country, because every Nigerian should actually be able to speak French. Most French people from francophone countries can speak English. We see most of their leaders can also speak and understand English. We don't have one Nigerian president that can speak French. Past or present, I don't think there's anyone, right? They always need, and so I think it really hinders our cooperation. But I'm bringing this up because France just left Senegal after 65 years of military presence. They are out.
Mhm.
Charles, I want to know what your, because we knew this was coming, and there's been a very strong anti French movement across Francophone Africa. But do you think this signifies something bigger?
Yes, because that means in the last, 2 years, France has had to leave Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, recently, I think, Cote d'Ivoire, and now Senegal. So basically, it is West African footprint is gone. Um, its major presence now is on the East African coast in Djibouti, where it has a base which it shares, well, not shares, or at least they have a fence with the Americans. But it is United, so in a way there is this, I think, from a point of view of sovereignty, I think it is necessary and it's a plus. But I am concerned, and a lot of people are concerned about the vacuum that it has left, because one of the things is that now the Sahel countries have totally no infrastructure or logistics to do regional security, to run anti-terrorism campaign. And we have seen, the Russians are coming in, they have filled some of the space, the vacuum. The Chinese are coming in and filling some of the vacuum. So it is there is a problem in that um, they have got rid of the bad imperialists and have merely brought in the good imperialists. I don't know whether that there is something like that at all.
Mhm.
So I think that in terms of true independence, they haven't solved anything. But really, these countries must now bulk up their capacity, because for whatever reason, I mean, given all the scenes of the French, one of the things they did is they provided the logistics to to enable these countries push back against this extremist group. So there is that worry that they have one thing on the left, but really, what are the losses that in terms of state security that they are facing on the right side?
You know, Adesua, I think there is a development that whose implications for Africa we have not discussed at length. The changing security architecture in Europe. It might just be because it's strange that France is giving up these assets without a fight or without trying to retain them, considering how much investment has gone into them. Um, just my own suspicion is that it's more that France is withdrawing its resources to beef up its or revamp its security priorities geographically within Europe, where they now, I think, see one, the threat of Russia as a real threat in terms of active war, and that threat will play out on the European soil. And the second is the departure of the US as a guarantor for the European security architecture. And so I think that what that means is that just the same way we're no longer a priority in terms of financing. They're not putting money in aid to Africa. It's probably the same way they are rethinking their whole security architecture, whether it involves presence in places far afield that don't have a direct, how shall I put it, a direct security or a direct defense and security meaning or implication for them, because you can't defend France from a base in Niger. What you were doing was securing your nuclear uranium sources. You were not really so. But if Putin attacked you, do you have the men? Do you have the boots on the ground to actually put up a fight? So I'm beginning to think that that is a much bigger reflection of why the French are happy to let go of these assets, having made an assessment that they might just be more of a nuisance than of any use to them, because I think they were going out knowing that the home ground is secure. So I think the new threats to security in Europe, Europeans had assumed that war had ended and that after World War II, there's never going to be war again. So my own thinking there, Charles, is that I think that Africans need to understand the implications of the new security architecture that's being brought in by Trump and rearranging NATO, and now the threats for an active war by Putin means that they're going to change the way they relate or have their presence in Africa. So we might be crediting ourselves with a bit more than we've actually caused. It may not be really that. I don't know what you.
Well. Actually, Bob, you're right, because the French have specifically said that the big security question for them is Russia.
Yeah.
So in one way, they have to pivot towards that. But also, I think really, I think in many ways, what's happening in West Africa marks the end of this very traditional Western format of military influence, and we are going to see several models. One of them, I think, is towards regional autonomy. So I think it's no accident that the Burkina Faso's, Mali's, and have broken off to form this alliance, which really at the end of the day is security co- cooperation structure. So yes, that we should be modest and not claim uh, have scored in a huge anti-imperialist victory. That in many ways, uh, you know, uh, the other global factors are behind this posture of the French.
Sorry, I dropped out. I knew I was going. I knew it was going to happen when Bob said I was stable today. I was like, this
He
I
jinxed it.
jinxed you.
jinxed it. You've jinxed it. But when we're talking about are we changing? Because the conversation I keep having with people is, are we changing one shoe for another? And it's particularly because very recently we saw Ghana go to Ukraine for defense support, and you come to see how important Russia's role in West Africa is. We've had stories of Ukrainian training for the groups that Russia is fighting in West Africa. Now it's because warfare and even terrorism has become drone warfare. We have Ukraine offering drone capabilities or expertise to West African nations, and Russia on the other end doing the same. And you spoke about Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger, and I think Russia's role in the breakup of ECOWAS, I think we're going to be telling the story for a very long time. Because very recently, Mali's one of the chief defense guys there was doing a tour around the country, or tour around some areas, trying to show strength. And in the pictures that the Malians put out, you only see their soldiers. But then in the pictures the Russians put out, you see the Russian soldiers who are essentially providing security for Malian soldiers in Mali. So,
Okay. No, but Charles, the and Adesua, I want to bring in a different perspective that comes from our region. And I think the best illustration of that is the Rwanda Defense Forces. That increasingly, what I see happening is that the African armies or military establishments that demonstrate effectiveness as fighting machines, but also unable to control situations and provide stability, are going to become partners of the Europeans. And I choose my words carefully. They're going to become partners of the foreign interests. And I think that's going to be like the new basis for diplomatic relations. Let me put it that way, because I don't want to step on too many toes. I'm now choosing my English correctly. What do I mean? If you have weak states like what this was described Mali, you're going to have presence of mercenary forces. That is what will replace the vacuum that you talked about. However, where countries like in Eastern Africa, where we have fairly functional and effective militaries, those militaries will now be relied upon to hold the fort in their areas. And so they will be supplied by these powers, these big powers. They will be financed to make sure that things don't fall apart and that their interests are well taken care of. So whether it is M23 and Eastern Congo, or Rwanda being asked to intervene in Mozambique and Central African Republic, whether it's Uganda in Somalia and DR Congo, Kenya, which also has a fairly good armed forces, Tanzania, the same story, you're going to see that it will make more sense for foreign powers to enter defense pacts and defense arrangements with these countries, because having bases will not make sense unless you're securing the Red Sea. So the only country that is going to continue earning rents from bases is going to be Djibouti. But that then introduces a new country in the mix that's going to become important, and that's a country called Somalia. Somalia and Eritrea are going to become significant players, because there, the big powers will want physical presence because they're securing trade routes. Uh,
I mean, I think Somalia is already important. I would say Somalia is already important.
it is important, but it acquires a new importance in the sense that, one, okay, they've found deposits of gas and oil in the seas, but in terms of where you deploy your security resources, your defense resources, instead of being in the hinterland somewhere in Chad, you would rather be in Somalia, where you have big economic interests, because there, so in other words, the Somalis are going to face increasing pressure to sort out their conflicts and stabilize, whether they like it or not. Turkey is already there and it's already doing a lot of work. But I mean, what my point is that yes, these guys are withdrawing, but the defense arrangements and the defense architecture is going to change, even on the African continent. And it's those countries
I
that,
want this.
sorry?
I want to actually ask, I want to ask about this.
Yeah.
Turkey.
Uh-huh.
I want to ask about Turkey
Charles knows.
because we yeah. I need answers because we had a little bit of a I saw it. I read to the news last week. Turkey says something about a group called FETO, FETO. Do you know what this is? I don't know what this is. I was just like, oh no, not a new one. But they're like a terrorist group in Nigeria, blah blah blah. But Nigeria's response was very strong. And so I was like, well, there's definitely more here than I understand. And then I
What
saw my
happened? What did Nigeria say?
the response was basically like mind your business and we decide who is a terrorist group or otherwise or something like that. But Turkey is like there is a terrorist group in Nigeria called FETO, this and that, and Nigeria is kind of like we're gonna decide what is a terrorist group and what is here and what is not here. That the response was kind of like chill out. But then it came back up in the news yesterday because our favorite Russian bot, David Hundaye, who likes to act like he's a journalist, posted it on his thing, CIA backed FETO terror group now in Nigeria. So then it was all over the place again. And I'm just like, I don't even know what this is. So please, what's Turkey's business here?
Well, and it isn't only in Egypt, because it's all over. One of the things, some years ago, when I went to Somalia, and it wasn't like it is today. It was the early years of the AU peacekeeping force and all that kind of thing. One of the things that really struck me was there was a hospital, somewhere in Mogadishu. I think it was the best hospital, and then there was an embassy, uh, Turkish because everyone is based in the green zone, but the Turkish embassy was outside the green zone. eh. So it was not protected by all these AU forces and UN infrastructure. It was alone, which suggested that as a country, they had been able to establish a level of rapport with the Al Shabaab so that their properties are not attacked, which is very strange because they were also the leading partner with the government. But you could see that just in terms of playing this game, they are really in the Horn of Africa. They are really ahead of the rest, because what the rest have is money. The UAEs and all those, they have money. But in terms of strategic thinking, I think the Turks are really ahead of everybody, and they are. Uh, if you consider, just for example, that I think Turkish Airways flies to more destinations in Africa than all other airlines except perhaps Ethiopian. So you begin to see that they have a game plan, and in a few years, assume the next uh, government after Erdogan is also of the similar mind. They are going to be easily the most influential power in Africa.
This one, let me hazard an explanation as to what feto is. I think I have an idea. So there was a man called Fethullah Gulen who lived in America. He was a very influential Turkish guy who ran schools and had all these soft influence organizations, a bit like a sort of Aga Khan type of figure. Now, uh, Erdogan, in coming to power, made it his primary business to get rid of the Fethullah organization across, destroyed it in Turkey, and then followed it everywhere. In fact, he even demanded that the Americans arrest Fethullah, and he wanted it declared a terrorist organization. So, what Turkey has successfully done is this organization had set up a lot of charity offices in different African countries, and was doing a lot of work with Muslim communities. So they set up schools, set up hospitals. But what Erdogan has been doing is he's been pressuring African governments to close down the Fetullah organizations, schools, and so on. There were many of them in Uganda as well. So, if you wanted to have a good relationship with the current Turkish government, one of their demands, it was almost on the same footing as the PKK. That's how Erdogan managed to push it. So, if you're asking about FETO, it is because it has been called Fethullah Terrorist Organization by the Turkish establishment.
Uh,
Yeah, and so they demand that every African government close down Fethullah Gulen's activities in their countries. So they've been very aggressive about that issue for the last 7 or 8 years since Erdogan came to power. I mean, at that I have seen. So that's what they were talking about. But the more serious issue in terms of Turkish moves is we've never quite healed from the problems of the Ottoman Empire, World War One, World War Two, divisions of oil. That history is still with us. And I think that Erdogan is the quintessential Turkish uh, sultan. And I think he sees himself, yes, in that mold, and has been trying to rebuild the Turkish influence across the key regions. And you can see it in his moves. And I think he wants to replace Iran. So you can see it in the moves with, he brought together Somalia and Ethiopia and got them to talk and stop all discussions of war. He's easily, as Charles said, the most powerful political influence in Somalia today. Um, he's got a very interesting, if you read the defense publications, they've got a thriving defense industry that is supplying a lot of the African police forces with equipment and is willing to share technology, which Western countries are not willing to share with these African countries. So, in that sense, I believe that he is doing exactly what UAE is doing, but putting not just money, but people on the ground. So, right now, it is Turkey that has won the contract to build the Ugandan railway. That is significant. They are the ones building the Tanzanian one as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you see moves where they're positioning themselves in places where they will be of great influence, in terms of creating defense pacts. So, again, back to where we started in terms of the French exiting. Yes, another thing you're likely to see is that, these Western powers are likely to, where they cannot outsource to existing African military establishments, they will outsource to the middle powers. One of those middle powers is definitely going to be Turkey, because one of the things that's not spoken about, one of the key players in the Libyan equation is Turkey. It's a key player in the Libyan equation. It is a key player in the Sudanese equation. It is a key player in Somalia and therefore Ethiopia. And I also think they have quite a bit of influence on Isaias in Eritrea. I don't know very much, but I believe that they do. So it's not a country that you can ignore. And in fact, when you talk to your friends in the Senate next time, tell them not to be dismissive of the Turks, because you saw what they did in Syria. That for me was a major political statement sending signals around the world. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I don't
but
think it was.
but let me ask this one now that we've gone back to this thing, why you know West West Africa does very well on many things except two. Um, After the glory period of Nigeria, West Africa seems to have a big problem getting their militaries together. Why is that? The second problem that West Africa seems to have, which I think East Africans do fairly well, is you West Africans, you can't run airlines. What's going on? Why are you unable to put together armies that work
I'm leaving.
and airlines that are profitable?
So airlines that are profitable, I'm leaving that. I'm not even. I try and start my day on a good note. Armies that work, I think it's a different there's no straight answer to this, because I think the question I would ask is also, how was East Africa able to curb the growth of terrorism in the way that you have? Because I remember at some point in time, it seemed that terrorism was going to get its foothold in East Africa before really here. The blowing Al Qaeda seemed to be looking at East Africa, not beyond Somalia, Kenya. The attacks in Mombasa. Like it seemed like East Africa was going to be the hotspot. It seems you guys have been able to jump that hurdle or somehow curb it, fight it more efficiently and more effectively than we have. And now West Africa and the Sahel region has become the hotspot for terrorism. Every country's armies, there's different reasons, I would say, for why our countries, the armies or the militaries, their strengths differ. In somewhere like Burkina Faso, where you keep having coups and you keep killing your generals every time you have a coup, that's leadership gone. You're killing they've essentially toppled themselves because they're so unstable with all the coup culture. Um, You have places like Nigeria where the fear of a military coup meant the removal of a lot of funding for the military and the retirement of a lot of our generals, and our strong military men were retired early. And so, in trying to weaken the military to strengthen democracy, you also weaken the functions of the military itself, right? And then you also have countries that are facing battles on different levels. And then you also have the fact that Nigeria really was big brother for the neighborhood for a while there. So a lot of people didn't need to develop like Benin and Togo. You don't really need to do much. You just call Nigeria if there's a serious problem, you keep your you keep your sizable force, but like if it really gets out of hand, you call big bro
They
Nigeria.
send you a platoon.
Take care of it.
Yeah, but then now Big Bro Nigeria is fighting on 10 different um, battlefields and 10 different issues, and now you have to sort out yourself. So I think like for every country, there will be a very specific reason as to why maybe it's not so great. I would say Chad is a shining example of a military that has been winning. You know, I also think the Malians, unfortunately, again, you see internal crisis has weakened their military structure so that then terrorism and all these things can now thrive because of the infighting in the country. So I think it's a lack of stability in the region in different ways that have led to this. Funny enough, Nigeria has been the most stable. We've had peaceful transition of power. It's such an odd thing to think about in Nigeria in this good way because we've had unbroken democracy since 99 now. So, but at the same time, we weakened our military to try and protect our democracy, but we're facing the repercussions of those actions.
I didn't know that. You mean there has been a deliberate policy to, to to protect democracy by weakening the military so that they don't stage a coup again? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think Obasanjo was did it, you know, most intentionally when he came back as a democratic head of state. There was a very strong intention to. I don't think the idea was weaken the military, but it was essentially weaken the military so that they don't come back and take democracy away, right? And so it's a well-intentioned thing of like, okay, all these overly powerful generals, let's retire them, or the structure kind of changed. And the person who led that was Obasanjo's bestie, but also his frenemy, Danjuma, General Danjuma, right? So Danjuma was really in charge of effecting this policy of let's make sure the military boys don't come back. And they as insiders were the ones who were in charge. Danjuma was really in charge of changing, retiring some of the boys and stuff. And I say he's Obasanjo's best friend or frenemy because Obasanjo never wanted Danjuma to have the same title as him or the same level as him. So he never promoted him. He never promoted him to the level.
But I just wanted to add that there was a time a couple of podcasts ago when I talked to you guys about the intelligence systems, and so I went up in arms. The point I needed to make to you is that in countries like you, and I like the example you brought of Chad. One of the reasons Chad is like that is because Chad has been at war since the 70s. Every single decade, there's been a military contestation against the existing government. And they used to come out of Libya. So when you have a history or a background of civil war, the people who are in charge of public affairs always prioritize investment in military capacity because they understand one very important point, that for them to control the politics, they must have a strong military. Otherwise, their control would then be. Now, it also helps that a lot of the leaders who have transitioned into political office were previously either intelligence operatives or military men who changed into civilian clothes. Now, what that does is that those people have an appreciation of why security is a primary investment. And So they know that their own political survival is based on a strong military. Now, there's only one difference, in a country like Kenya. I think what Kenya has understood is that for the because Kenya, the state, works on behalf of the business community. Now, in order for them to thrive, the military must be able to guarantee stability. They need that stability to do the business. Now, at the other countries, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, they understand that in order to control the politics, they need a very strong military, which guarantees stability in many ways. Now, that has gifted us with effective military establishments to keep them busy so that they don't cause trouble. They are sent on foreign missions to go and supposedly carry out Pan African duties. Yeah.
Peacekeeping.
Pan African duties. But actually, it is also, by the way, Adesua, it is also one, a, a reason to invest in them continuously so that they are effective even in those missions. But two, when soldiers are at war, they improve their skills. There is continue. It's almost like a training ground. It's otherwise you get a good footballer and you put him on the bench. What use is he? So it's also an opportunity for them to engage in active warfare, learn new tactics. So those force investment in a good military, and that's why. The South Africans were unpleasantly surprised in Eastern Congo. And these guys haven't fought a war in, 30 years. Charles, when was the last time SNDF fought a war? So you could see that many of them are ill prepared for actual combat and they can't do these things. The guys who fought are all now either in retirement or dead. So back to the real issue that it's these countries, like I said, these countries that have invested and demonstrated effective militaries, those are the ones that are actually now going to step into the void, and those countries will be strong. The ones that are weak, they're weak because those Sahels, they were busy just eating money and hoping France will continue to help them. Now they have to look for other uh, people to guarantee their security because they just don't have the infrastructure, and to build that is going to take a long time. And it's not surprising that the countries we've talked about, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, are the few, even South Africa, are the few countries on the continent that have a national defense college. That's important. That's significant.
So I want us, before we round up, before I have to go back to the National Assembly. Oh gosh, yesterday Senator Natasha tried to come in. They locked the gates,
I saw that.
and then to my absolute delight, because I was I was like, okay, let me see if I can get video. Some overzealous security officer decided he wanted to seize my phone, and then tries to and pulls my arm out through the gate, cutting me open.
Oh,
And I was, yeah, just cut. It's not that much of an injury. It's very small.
yeah.
But I was just standing there like, I could have lived a very plush, soft life. Now I'm bleeding at the gates of National Assembly for no reason. Like, this is not a fancy protest. This is just, why am I bleeding? I was like, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? This is ridiculous. Just I said, what's going on here? But yeah, so fun days ahead. I don't know if she's gonna try again today because she only has 2 more days before they go on their little summer vacation. And then all hope is gone. So I don't know if she's gonna try again today, but I want to get there before her. So I'm on the other side of the gate this time. Before we go, because we've been talking about weak countries and strong countries,
Mm.
Eswatini. Some
Okay, I know the story. I know the story that you want, which is the story of the guys being deported there. For me, the Eswatini story is that is that.
that's what I wanted to ask you about his watch collection because that's what I've heard
Oh, okay.
about the king.
You haven't, I thought you'd ask about his car collection. There's a much bigger problem. His wife collection has fallen apart. The latest wife has left. Zuma's daughter has gone home. She doesn't. She says the guy is not functioning.
Eh? The first king to lose a wife
Yes, the
in recent years.
22-year-old is saying the guy is not firing on all cylinders. I've gone home.
No, no, no. She didn't say that, Bob. Did she?
She said, I don't see him.
Oh
let,
no!
let us just
Oh
do our
no!
good event or bad event of the weekend.
Oh no!
There you go.
But
I've
it's
been
a really
stunned
weak
into
state. Eh?
silence. You
It's
know what?
really
I'm not.
weak. Eh?
No, it's a joke of a state. That the guy is a complete disaster. Is it like a clown? I mean, it's just he has about 14 or 15 Rolls Royces. For an economy that size. Those guys, the only thing they do is grow sugarcane. So but they're a small country. It's like running not even a district not even a federal state. It's like running a town in a remote town in Nigeria. That's what this guy is on about. Yeah. So yeah, I guess for me, the fact that she left him, the first African woman to leave a king, I think that will be my event of the week. She went back home.
Go back home to her.
Yeah, she told her father, "I'm not going back." And the man went on a visit to Morocco instead. So we don't know where that's going to end.
So,
For to
so is are they going to return his lobola?
Well, and the problem is that Zuma is broke, so I don't know.
He, he's already eaten
Yeah, of
it.
course. And being
I thought the practice that you wait for 2 years.
and being Zuma, he may have married another one because he's also in that field, so he may have used that lobola to JZ. Oh man, yeah, that's
You know, my parting shot is I thought I'd ask the so about the rebasing of Nigeria's
GDP.
economy. You've grown from 80 trillion to 205
she
trillion.
has laughed. The way she's laughing,
Don't laugh.
the way she's laughing.
But
I think
Let me tell you, Tinubu sent one of his spokesmen, special advisors on media, whatever, to arise to the news station, and we were asking him questions about the economy, and he was just like, "These are fake numbers. Just wait till they rebase it. Just wait till they rebase it." I said, "Oh, you're rebasing. We are number 4 in Africa. Oh, you're nice. Wait till the real numbers come out." I said, "These are the real numbers."
but I mean, to their credit, I mean, a lot of economies rebase after every after every 5 years. I think the last rebasing in Nigeria was 2013, so it
that
was
is
probably
that when
due.
they
But
overtook
you
South
know,
Africa.
the 3 weeks ago, you guys remember, I spoke about the South African police
Yeah.
putting
Mm,
up an advert for 5,500
Hmm.
jobs, and that within 24 hours they got 68,000 applications. Now, at that time, I speculated that it will come to 200,000. The numbers just came out. There were over 1 million
No
applications,
way.
the majority women. So, I mean, it just tells you that we really have a problem. This is, depending on, before the Nigerians, rebased, it had gone back to Africa's largest economy and most industrialized country. But that story tells you the the unemployment situation. Now, my own parting shot has in May the Ethiopian doctors went on strike.
Mhm.
And since then, I think they have arrested about 150 of them.
Mhm.
But I was reading this story, and this Ethiopian doctor was explaining just how badly they are paid. The average doctor in Ethiopia earns $56 a month. You can't buy dinner for two at a Nairobi, fashionable restaurant with that. In fact,
Even
that's
for
probably
one,
dinner for just
even
one.
one person, $56.
But then he said something that was really striking. He compared Ethiopia with Somaliland,
Mhm.
which is basically breakaway territory, and he said that a pathologist in Somaliland in a month earns an official salary equivalent to that of 20 Ethiopian doctors. I just we are not serious.
Well,
We are just not serious people, Africans. We hopeless.
so let me just do my parting shot because it's similar. It's similar,
Mhm.
you know. It's, so retired Nigerian policemen and women are protesting their pensions or lack thereof, um, either poor payment or lack of payment, right? And they were protesting at National Assembly on Monday, and then they were protesting at police headquarters yesterday. And obviously, as expected, police were brutalizing the ex-policemen. But my favorite part of this, yeah, and someone was sitting down with me saying, "Do they know they are also fighting for them? Because they too will retire, like they too will need pension." So I said, "No, no, no, don't ask important questions. Just watch." But my favorite part of this is that Omoyele Sowore, who is, activist, runs for president every election, also sometimes journalist, or I don't know what but he was there with the policemen and he was wearing Ray-Ban glasses and a policeman realized that that's recording. So they snatched it off his face. So you just see a video of a policeman like essentially just charge at him, grab his glasses and go. And the first time I watched the video, I was like, why would they grab his sunglasses? And then it comes out that it's the Ray-Ban AI recording.
but you know,
I said, wow,
but you know the policeman,
Nigeria updated.
the policeman, that policeman was a fool because the Ray-Ban had already delivered the images to the
Yeah,
server. So when you take,
Really?
yeah, that's why.
yeah, because it's not like it has a memory
No,
card or whatever it is
it's
on
streaming to a
itself.
server, so it doesn't make.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I watched the video over and over again and I said, wow, we're funny. But also that this is a new update of Nigeria policemen. So that means they'll be telling them which one is recording glasses.
Yeah. Guys, see you next week, man.
Can't make this out. Have a good
You
week.
guys are
You
fun.
guys.
All right.
Bye.